Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Tonight we're joined by Doğu Eroğlu, who is an investigative journalist focusing on terrorist groups and radicalization, and we will be speaking about the future of regional extremism following a possible operation in Syria's Idlib. Good evening, Doğu. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So we're having this conversation only hours after today's tripartite summit in Tehran, in the capital city of Iran, between President Erdogan, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. And the end seems to be nearing in Idlib for Syria's 7-year, almost 8-year war. We're talking about a civilian population of 2.5 million and around 50,000 militants here who will likely be stuck in the area in the event of a military operation by the Syrian Arab army. So my first question to you is, what will happen in your opinion to these civilians and militants in Idlib? What are the possible scenarios?
After today's talks, I can see there are two ultimate scenarios at this moment. The first, either the de-escalation zone policy that being set up during the Astana process will be partly fulfilled, and the conflict will be postponed as some of the non-state armed groups comply to Turkey's demands, which was reiterated today as well. Or the operation will begin in a harsh manner without giving non-state armed groups any chance to regroup later. This means the total collapse of the de-escalation zone policy in Idlib, of course. And in this case, an influx of refugees to Turkey is highly likely. But I should note that there are many sub-branches to those two ultimate scenarios, each affecting Turkey in a different way. For each scenario I mentioned, one of the options is Turkey opening up its borders to hundreds of thousands of refugees, or buffer zones under the monitoring of UN could be another option.
So, unlike Russia, Turkey supports a ceasefire in Idlib, as we've seen as a result of today's talks in Tehran. How do you assess Turkey's current position?
Yeah, that ceasefire option was not very much welcomed by Putin, as you saw. Humanitarian concerns are one side of the coin. It is true that Turkey already hosts several millions of refugees from Syria for years. And it is obvious that the government has failed in many ways in terms of integration. Social rights are lacking, letting the industry take advantage of cheap refugee labor without providing work safety. That is a huge concern. Refugees are not being represented, and education services for them are in a mess. And even after years, refugees are not certain of their future in Turkey. But those are the concerns of refugees. On the other hand, if we take a peek to the Turkish society, they have been very suspicious of refugees, if not hostile. I think the hostility towards refugee communities is a very shared future for every part of Turkish community nowadays, and it has always been the case for years to come. Let me tell you a personal account. I was in Gaziantep in August 2014 and witnessed how a simple crime could lead the whole city into chaos. Following the murder of a Turkish landlord by Syrian tenants, crowds went into the streets asking for revenge, and angry mobs swept the city looking for refugees to harm. And even myself, I witnessed some of the angry mobs going after some Syrian kids, tried to stop them, but they were everywhere at that time of the year. And later, I saw when I was talking to citizens in Gaziantep, I saw each and every grievance about refugees being spoken by locals. So they were basically forgotten why they went into the streets at the first place. So what I'm trying to say is, at that time, in Gaziantep, price hikes in rents, increased competition in labor markets, inflation due to the arrival of hundreds of thousands of refugees were local problems. So when things are bad, especially at times of economic downturn, such as nowadays, all the frustrated citizens need to move against refugees. Well, it begins with a simple spark. But look at the lira's steep depreciation and economic downturn. I believe the government cannot even convince its own supporters that the right thing to do is welcoming more refugees. So we just witnessed a lynch attempt to Syrian refugees in İdlib the other day, and it's a clear sign that Turkish communities have mixed feelings against the refugees. So it could easily turn to an open hostility after that point if the government insists on bringing 2 million more refugees to Turkey. So the Turkish communities everywhere, I think they're basically against this plan. But in my opinion, Turkey's actual reservation is about security. For explaining this, we should go back to the procedure how Turkish security apparatus dealt with Islamic State threat. Well, Turkey learned a lesson in a very hard and sad way. At the beginning of 2014, I witnessed that we all did witness that local and national media began reporting about Islamic State cell networks all over Turkey was making propaganda and recruitment, but Turkey, turned a blind eye to those on-the-ground activity, mainly because those recruits were to fight against YPG and Rojava in Syria and Iraq. So the point I'm trying to make, Turkey left those on-the-ground activities unchecked. So in the end, it was impossible for the security apparatuses to track down who was doing what. We can easily look at to the notorious Gaziantep cell structure to illustrate this example. It began its violence campaign in Turkey. When it began its violence campaign in Turkey in 2015, Turkish security apparatuses and intelligence listed those who got radicalized in Adıyaman as prime suspects. And after all, the assailants of IED attacks to HDP's Diyarbakır rally and SGDF's gathering in Suruç were from Adıyaman. So the security apparatus had a point there. But what they did a security campaign all over the nation. The pictures and identity information about Adıyaman radicals got distributed to local police and the media, and everybody was looking for them. Only after Ankara attack on October 10, 2015, which was carried out by another jihadist from Adıyaman, the security apparatus understood that the actual perpetrator of those attacks was indeed the cell network in Gaziantep, using young radicals as cannon fodder. So then, because the police found out that the suicide bombers were brought to Ankara by 2 cars from Gaziantep, and even after that intelligence, it took months for designers of those attacks being captured in Gaziantep. So immediately after the Ankara explosion, what was the prime target become? The next popular jihadist attacker profile became Gaziantep cell members instead of former Adıyaman recruits. They started going after Gaziantep cell members. But then in 2016, attacks started to be carried out by foreign nationals. Everybody remembers the Istanbul Atatürk Airport attack and Reyna attack on January 1st, 2017. Both attacks were very hard to be avoided for the police because of the profiling lag I've been mentioning. They've been profiling the attackers, the perpetrators, but only after a certain profile went into dealing with those attacks. So if the security apparatuses had monitored Islamic State border activity, the activities of the local Islamic State cell networks, and other proxies, all of those attacks could have been easily averted. The police would know, as starters, the connection between Adıyaman radicals and Gaziantep cell structure, so the attacks perpetrated by this group could have been prevented. But all these attacks told the security apparatus that there are many Salafist communities in Turkey, and some of them are comprised of foreign nationals at this time of the Syrian conflict. And the police knows only now that they having no prior information about those communities make Turkey very vulnerable to security threats. So it may be argued whether Turkey is doing a good job or not in its crackdown over those communities, but I can say that now the security apparatus is aware of potential threats, so I won't expect Turkey to welcome a huge number of refugees, among which foreign fighters could hide themselves. Turkey doesn't really know what sorts of chain of commands those fighters are operating in, and I believe would do its best to find another solution than letting the influx of refugees into Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift our focus away from Turkey for a little while now, and let's get back to the situation on the ground in Idlib. The Syrian Arab Army seems now to have almost total control in the east of the river Euphrates, and Idlib seems to be the only remaining rebel stronghold in the area. So do you think the Syrian army is likely to face a serious resistance by the rebel factions in this area?
Right. Well, there's a clear example in front of us. It is the Battle of Aleppo. It was 2 years ago, almost the same time of the year. But if all else fail, the negotiations fail, and in case Turkey cannot stop the operation, and other proposals of Turkey to be rejected, Syria, the regime, may try to finish the civil war at Idlib at this moment. But well, looking at how Syria moved step by step until now, it makes me think that regime may still find some benefits prolonging the conflict. After the anti-Islamic State Global Coalition and SDF took over the fight against Islamic State in 2015, and of course Russia started its physical presence in Syria at the same, almost more or less the same time, the regime recaptured rebel-held areas one by one, and at every step it allowed rebel factions or Al-Qaeda alliance groups to leave and move northwards, mostly to Aleppo at first, and then to Idlib, as you know. That's how hundreds of thousands of IDPs, the international displaced, internally displaced people, filled Idlib today, multiplying its former population by like 5 or 6, because everybody's talking about millions now, and Idlib was not that much of a big city before then. It is full of IDPs belonging to other rebel-held areas in the past. So Syria chose a day-to-day strategy, brought security to recaptured areas, let the rebels escape, and decided to deal with them later, once it regained its total sovereignty over the land. But I think the Syrian regime may opt for that sort of a strategy as well, instead of trying to devastate Idlib. There's still Turkey and FSA controlled area in the north, as you know, Euphrates Shield area, and the corridor might be opened up for transfer of armed factions that will leave Idlib as a city full of unarmed civilians on the paper at least. So in today's meetings in Tehran, Turkey also asked disbandment of 12 armed groups and moving those fighters to FSA-controlled area, the Euphrates Shield pocket. So I think that corridor strategy may give Russia more time on Syrian soil. They may legitimize their presence there, and so does Turkey. So in that case, Turkey might find some other reason to occupy the Al-Bab area, to be the host of FSA factions, and whatever factions will be coming from Idlib. However, it may also give Kurds more reason to reach a settlement with the regime, as Turkey will host more armed groups in the al-Assad area under this scenario. So that is the downside of that scenario for Turkey. The regime and the Kurds, the Rojava Federation, might come into a better alignment in that case. Well, this solution overall may come easy if the other leaders, Russia and Iran, will let Turkey make its deals on the ground and like distinguish which faction is which, and it may come out to be a slow and catastrophic one, depending on what strategy the non-state armed factions in Idlib will follow. If they comply with Turkey's corridor strategy, it will be as I told. But my best guess, we might see a similar scenario to that of Aleppo, meaning months of clashes, and then only after then a corridor may be opened.
Mm-hmm. Let's now try to understand the situation on the ground in Idlib a bit better now. For our viewers who are not very familiar with what's going on in the area,
right,
can you list the main rebel factions and jihadist networks currently based in Idlib, and how do they position themselves within this conflict?
Well, that is I think the most complicated question in this whole problematic, because as I told you minutes ago, all the displaced factions, rebel factions, jihadist groups, or if it's aligned with Al-Qaeda or not, they ended up in Idlib. So I better not speculate over which armed factions are and jihadist groups are influential over the decision-making process in Idlib, because I'm neither there or taking accounts from there. But we can safely say that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS plays a major role for sure. That is, the HTS is the well, I may call it as a direct descendant of Syrian proxy of Al-Qaeda. So they are the new rebranded Al-Qaeda faction in Syria, but there's also Hulas al-Din, which is an Al-Qaeda loyalist splinter of HTS. They left HTS because they didn't like the HTS's negotiation with Turkey, and very long time Turkey-backed Ahrar al-Sham. That is also an Islamic faction, but lacking some jihadist characteristics. Partly some remnants of FSA, other Islamic factions like Sayrak al-Sham, Shukur al-Sham, they are considered to be Islamic factions too, but are not considered to be jihadist in nature. So they don't really follow the Al-Qaeda line of thinking.
And what about the Islamic State? Can we talk about an Islamic State presence in Idlib right now?
No, well, not really. Islamic State presence is quite limited to eastern Syria, and it's surrounded by regime forces. So Islamic State is not really on the table at Idlib discussions. Okay, everybody mentions their name as the main foe, but I think it's because of the discourse, it's because of the rhetoric. So, but there's another side of the story. Well, changes in allegiances among Salafist ranks had always been a case during Syrian civil war. So if one asks whether there are individuals in Idlib who used to fight in the ranks of Islamic State or not, my answer would be, of course, there could be quite possibly many individuals who had fought for Islamic State before, but right now Islamic State is not a party in this conflict.
Mm-hmm. You've recently published a book in Turkish about Islamic State networks in Turkey, within Turkey, and all these jihadist networks in Idlib that we've been talking about are known to be of a transnational cross-border nature. So can you explain for us how this is so, and how are these groups linked to other groups and networks in Turkey right now?
Well, as I just mentioned, the changing allegiances is a very common theme among Turkish Salafist groups as well. Well, alongside the Syrian civil war, some groups, some individuals, or some local groups left Cephet Nusra for Islamic State. Cephet Nusra being the direct al-Qaeda proxy in Syria, or the other way around. Some may find fighting for Islamic State, well, let's say, more profitable in terms of well, monetary gains. Some may find it safer in the long run, or vice versa. Well, in the long run, jihadist organizations, change of success, the promise of success in Syria makes those changes in allegiances of individuals. So, I should say that Al-Qaeda networks have or had a lot of direct contact with Turkey throughout the whole Syrian civil war process. But I don't know. Turkey doesn't really know which factions, rooting back to Al-Qaeda's proxy in Syria, may be affected by the global agenda of leadership of HTS. So I think that is another risk factor that Turkey will be taking if they welcome the jihadists in Idlib into Turkey or FSA controlled area. But it is also another problem. This problem also affects third countries, the former allegiances of jihadists or the future allegiances of jihadists. So because it is kind of unknown, uncharted waters for everyone else to predict their future agendas. Today, Turkey also suggested to Iran and Russia that foreign fighters to return their home countries if they wish so. I mean the foreign fighters in Idlib currently. So the case in which Turkey hosts those foreign fighters and asks them whether do they want to be deported or not is quite worrisome for some countries, because Turkey had many problems with third countries, European countries, Australia. According to many countries, Turkey is not the best partner when it comes to such procedures, departures, or deportations of jihadists. In the past, I remember the deportation process of Ibrahim al-Bakouri. Bakouri was one of the assailants to attack to Zaventem airport in Belgium. So Bakouri was captured in Turkey at first, and then the foreign ministry sent a correspondence to Belgium whether do they want al-Bakouri or not. And Belgium didn't respond to that correspondence. So the internal ministry asked al-Bakouri himself, Ibrahim al-Bakouri himself, whether they would he be interested in going back to Europe or a third country. And Bakouri chose to be deported back to Netherlands. And then he came back to Belgium and perpetrated the Zaventem airport attack in Belgium. So I think in those manners, Turkey is not very trustworthy. And also I should note that it is very interesting that Turkey did not suggest any justice mechanism today about the remaining jihadists in Idlib at the Tehran summit, because in my personal opinion, an international tribunal would be probably the best solution. But I see that neither parties seem to think that that would be a permanent solution, or at least a step towards solution.
Thank you very much, Doğu, for joining us tonight and for your comments.
Thank you for having me again.
We'll continue with our next news video.